Good morning. Joe Wennberg, Bluebird Semaphore. It's October 4, 2023. And I'm going to talk a little more about a couple of books I've already been talking about. First of all, this John Adams thing. Like I said, I was getting tired of him just being such an elitist and coming from that whole elitist sector of the early stages of this country. And that I just didn't want to have anything more to do with him. But, I'm about ready to cut him a little slack because he was just like everybody else in his slice of the pie of the New World. The long-standing families had established themselves here, made themselves wealthy, and felt they had every right to be the elite, every right to be the government of this new land, every right. And that those who hadn't got on as well as them, there was no need to trouble themselves about them. This was the way of the world. As a matter of fact, they pretty much had it in their theocracy that that's the way the Lord intended it, that there would be rich and poor. And they saw nothing wrong with that. Now, I wanted to say that, they weighed your status in society based on the cost and the position of your pew in their meeting house, their church, so to speak. So I'm cutting him some slack because he's just like everybody else from that time frame. The elites ran the world, and it was so deemed by God. And it's the same thing today. They're just not running around saying God as much, but it's the same thing. And I think I'm just going to give up on that book. First of all, I don't find it all that captivating. Just so I may pick it up who knows. But more importantly, the other book, Magellan. Now that's really grabbed me. I like it a whole lot. It's not too long. It's about 300 pages. And the author, I told you, I think it's Tim Joyner. Simple title, Magellan. And it's just a fascinating account of how Magellan got his ships. And I think by then there was only 4 left. Got his ships through the Straits of Magellan. Of course, they weren't called that yet. He was looking for something that was going to cut through the South American continent to get him into the Pacific, and then he thought it'd be a hop, skip, and a jump to get himself close to the Spice Islands, that's where their destination was to be. So after, I think, over 30 days of trying to get through the straits there, and what a magnificent story that is. I had read at least one other accounting of the straits, but a more contemporary accounting. I can't think of the title of the book. I may still have it somewhere, but so I was familiar with a lot of the names and a lot of the ways the strait is set up. And so reading Magellan's account came to me, I guess, a little easier because I knew where these places were. But when you get the book and you read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Just amazing. And this strait goes through some of the most amazing scenery in the world. Think about being squeezed through a narrow channel, maybe 3 or 4 miles at most, and on either side mountains covered in glaciers going down to the sea, and totally pristine waterways, pretty much laden with fish, and just story after story of how difficult it was for him and his crew. There's a lot of suffering from scurvy because they didn't have the required amounts of vitamin C and maybe other nutrients that you would get from eating fresh food. So they were suffering scurvy. And I came across a reference to a spot of land, or on the, I'm going to call it the north side of the strait, called Fortescue. Might really be called Fortescue Bay, so that really wouldn't make it a spot of land, but whatever, Fortescue. And I was so amazed because there is this place called Fortescue on the Delaware Bay shore down here where I live. Not right where I live, probably 20 miles up the coast, further up the coast from where I am. But Fortescue is a spectacularly beautiful estuary in and along the shore up there. It's just spectacular. You drive through some woods, then you drive through some meadows, and finally there's the somewhat anticipated sand strand. And that must have been fairly significant back in the day because they built a little community there. Who knows what and why, but it probably had to do with oystering, because that's what they did back then. They did a lot of oystering. And as a matter of fact, there is a museum in the area, more in the area of Bivalve, which is a little down the coast from there. Tell you all about it. But what's left is a smallish marina run by the state, smallish, couple of open party boats, and that's how I got around to knowing about Fortescue. Although I had seen it on a map for years, and the name itself had intrigued me, and I wanted to know more about Fortescue. So I finally found it. It actually took me two attempts because I don't use any of this radar navigation or whatever they have today, cell phones and maps that are put up on some electronic device within your car. I don't use any of that. I had a hard map, and you get down to that level, the roads are difficult to understand what road you're really on and what the map is saying. So I didn't find it the first time. The second time I did find it, totally thrilled. And then I was able to go down and do some open party fishing, which is very nice because unlike a lot of fishing that goes on with these open party boats, particularly on the shore, the ocean shore, you go out for like one species of fish. You go out for maybe summer flounder, which I call fluke, or you go out for striped bass, you go out for something, but usually one. When you go out fishing in a bay, you're liable to catch a half a dozen different variety of fish. So it makes it more interesting, I think, and plus it's a little more scenic and da-di-da-di-da. So I went out there, I went open party fishing twice at a Fortescue. So I was thrilled to see this place in, of all places, Patagonia, named Fortescue. Now, it wasn't named that when Magellan was there. None of these places had that name. Magellan, when he was discovering things, would name them. And I don't think he gave the name Fortescue to this place. Probably somebody else came along and named it later on. But be that as it may, they, in the book, they get through the straits, and like I said, he thinks it's going to be a hop, skip, and a jump to get across the Pacific. Well, it wasn't. So they went out there. He goes up the coast. That would be up the Chilean coast. Then he moves west. And interestingly enough, he decides not to replenish his stores before he sets out across the Pacific. Who knows why? I guess he thought he was going to get there in a couple of weeks. But he decides not to hit the mainland of South America and get stores, nor does he think of going into that island that's out there. I think it's Juan Fernandez. He doesn't stop there, and he blows right by a couple other islands. And then before you know it, he and his crew are in serious trouble due to lack of water and food. But he solves all the problems. Very tenacious man, this Magellan. Excuse me, I gotta get a cup of coffee here. Very tenacious, you know. Perhaps that was his downfall. But he goes to places that Europeans hadn't been before. Like, for example, he comes alongside what we call Guam now. He comes to know those people who inhabit Guam. There's quite a lot of people. They're a little bit more advanced than your typical native population back in those days. And they do have a couple of encounters with them of a negative type, but everything gets worked out and they get friendly relations. But he has to move on, and he does. He moves on, and the next thing you know, he's hitting the Philippines. He has no idea that this is going to happen, but he starts hitting the Philippines, I think, at about the same spot on the Philippine Islands where the World War II battle between Japanese fleet and the American fleet took place, and that would be Leyte Gulf, and which the Americans did win, pretty much put the end to Japanese ability to conduct warfare on the seas. It was the result of that. But the Magellan kind of hits terra firma there, and he negotiates inland. No. Don't forget, the World War II is still 300, 400 years in the future. It hasn't even happened yet. But he's negotiating down, and he comes across Cebu, Cebu, which is one of the larger islands in the Philippines. And once again, down there, they get a little, fighting with the locals, which they did every step of the way. They come in, they fight, and then they patch things up. They come in, they fight, patch things up. So he's there, and now he's got to hop off of Cebu and get himself further on his way to the Molucca Islands, the Spice Islands, which this is one of the difficulties of reading about this part of history, that these islands have 2 and 3 different names for the same island. And a lot of them are similar. This island's name is similar to that island's name. You're not quite sure where you really are. It's one of the difficulties, and I've mentioned this before, the same thing with other parts of the world, where the naming, the nomenclature is so different. They actually, on a lot of maps, they have to put 2 names on next to a place, because you don't know who's reading and which name they're going to understand. But, excuse me again. But he does get down there. Well, no, he doesn't, actually. Before he even leaves Cebu, he goes a little offshore to an island, Mactan, and he goes there because he's annoyed. Like I said, his aggressiveness would eventually be his downfall. He's a little annoyed because there was a very warlike, big-time chief of that island who had recently done some bad things to some Europeans who wound up on his shore, I think. But anyway, he had done some bad things. Maybe he did some bad things to the local chieftain on Cebu that Magellan had the chief believe that Magellan was his best friend, and now Magellan was going to have an opportunity to show him what a good pal he was. He was going to go over there and teach that chief on Mactan Island, not to mess with any of Magellan's buddies. So that's what he does. And this guy, he had thousands of warriors under his control. Magellan goes there all, just out of his mind, crazy about how he's going to kill all these people. And they're all decked out in their armor, 60 of them. And they can't get close enough to shore to get out of their boats with full armor on. So they had to take the armor off their legs. I don't know if it was from the knee down or what, but they took at least some of the armor off their legs and they trotted inland, and the battle starts. Well, what this caused was the local people, the local warriors, were able to shoot arrows into the Spaniards' legs and caused them a lot of difficulty. Now, some of these were poison arrows and so on. Plus, because of this stretch of water that was low and they had to walk through it, the boats that had brought them to this other island, which was about 9 miles away, their guns couldn't reach the shore to get the chief's warriors. The guns just didn't reach that far, so they didn't have that support. So it was really an atrocious situation for Magellan. And before you know it, his troops are defecting. They're all running away to get back to their boats that would be able to, get them out of there. But Magellan simply, he's too courageous to just get up and run away like that. So he and a few of his men stay back and try to keep fighting these guys. And then eventually there's no more fight left in Magellan and his guys. Magellan falls down, and the Indians, not Indians, the natives, the troops of that warrior are all over him and kill him. So that was the end of Magellan on Mactan Island. So the guys who got back in the boats, and I think they call them shallops or scallops or something, they go back to Cebu. They get back on their ships and they sail on towards the Moluccas. And they do get there. They do find the spices. It's a wonderful thing. I have some maps here that perhaps we can get a little closer where these guys really are. So I don't know if we can. This is always a challenge to do this, but I'm going to try. So. Okay, so here we go. Over here, well, here's the Philippines, right? And I believe that after all that rigmarole with Cebu and Mactan Island, he gets over here on this island, and which is something. Oh yeah, Palawan Island, a fairly long island, and they're over here. I think somewhere from about here, they set sail to the Spice Islands. Now, the actual Spice Islands, if you see them, You can see them. I don't have to go like this. Get that light not coming in here. Are right along this island. And okay. This is not working out well. How about if I go like this? No, I can't do that. What about like this? Well, how about like this? Here we go. Let's do this. I think this is taking away the ability to see anything. Borneo, big guy, little guy. Well, let's just say that it's in this general area. Okay. This is Borneo. Then there's this large island here. That's either Celebes or Sulawesi. And then over here, there's another island that looks a little like this island, but it's smaller. And off its east coast, the string of islands are the Spice Islands. Now, the Spice Islands come down and they go across something called the Banda Sea, which reading this book caused me to take a look at. Now, there's bunches of seas all around here. There's the Arafura Sea. There's the Timor Sea. There's lots of them. The Banda Sea, the Molucca Sea. Let me get my other map, which I think might be a little better to see this. Might be. Who knows? Let's see, put this back on. Do we see it or don't we? Yeah. Okay. So, here's the island that I said was Celebes and Sulawesi, something like that. Now you go across the water. You gotta be going north now. You come across to this other island. Now, if you see this island, shape is similar to this island. They both, to me, look like crabs. But the Spice Islands are all along this eastern coast, okay? And you can get the cloves and the nutmeg, and I think, I don't want to say it, but I think cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon from those. But interestingly enough, in the middle of the Banda Sea, okay, there's Banda Sea Islands. That was another place you could get nutmeg, and there was trade going on there for eons, from the east to them, and then back. Always using the monsoons. Those winds would propel the ships in one direction, then the next half of the year propel them in the other direction. So this is the area that we're talking about when we're talking about the Spice Islands. Okay, and they're right off the coast of New Guinea, the western tip. The book goes on, talks about the encounters while they're in this island, which, by the way, is one name is Halmahera, but there are other names. You got to watch it with that. But eventually over there, they wind up with two ships left. One is the Victoria, and the other is the Trinidad. Victoria decides that they're going to take off and get back to Spain. So the route they take is they head south. They're heading south until they get to Timor. Okay? Which means they're going through these bits of islands. They get to Timor, and then from Timor, they can head due east, cross the Indian Ocean, under Africa, and come back up to Spain, which they do, very fine and dandy. The other ship, the Trinidad, is in such bad condition, they have to try to do repairs. They keel it or do something. They turn it on its side. There's a term for that. I can't think of it right now. They do the patching, and patching takes about 3 or 4 months. And by now they're out of time. They can't use the trade winds for the remainder of that year. So they decide, this brilliant guy, by the way, everybody's been dying. There's very few people left. And so they have to use the less talented to captain their ships and serve as pilots and navigators. So they get one of these less talented guys. He's going to be the captain and the commander of the remaining vessel, which, like I said, is the Trinidad. And he says, look, boys, we can't go and pick up the trade winds. We're going to have to come up with another plan. The plan we're going to take is we're going to go north, kind of retrace our steps up towards the east of the Philippines. We're going to go way up north, and then, of course, we will have gotten to the top of Asia, and then we'll just head west, and we'll be home safe. So, no, that's not what the reality was. The reality was they kept sailing north until they got way into the Pacific. They retraced their steps pretty accurately because they know they did get past Guam, and they continue to go further up. But they were going into the northern latitudes, and now, of course, it gets cold, and they're already undernourished, they're already exhausted, and the cold is beating them down. They get up pretty far up north. They're actually well due east of one of the major islands of Japan, well due east. So they're way up there in the colder North Pacific. And finally, they see the writing on the walls, and they go back. So now they go all the way back to the port in the Spice Islands. They go all the way back, and that's about where I am. I don't know if they are able to salvage the Trinidad. I don't know. I haven't got that far. But the book itself is just a really great book to read, particularly if you've been hungering after just where are these Spice Islands. They're one of the great lures of history, along with the Silk Road. You have the Spice Islands. Tremendous lures of history. You think of some of the tremendous lures. You have David Livingstone trying to find the source of the Nile, exposing the dark continent, all the things he did. You have people like the mountain men in North America going into the Rockies, living with the Indians, other ordeals that became great sagas. You know, let's bring the two explorations of the poles into this list. You have the Antarctic explorations and the Arctic. Both of them have stories of gargantuan heroic proportions. And I could probably think of a few more that fit into this genre of Europeans seeking out the farthest reaches of the planet. That they did. James Cook, Captain Cook, he circumnavigated the globe. And of course, you know what his demise was. Eventually, he's put down in a similar event that Magellan was put down. Cook was put down by native Hawaiians. I forget what the cause was. One of the big causes of the behavior that we would call inappropriate or the aggressive behaviors of the natives against the Europeans was the Europeans would come to town and they would disrespect the local women, which really, in many cases, put the local men or made them crazy. So there was retaliation. Now, in some cases, you know, the locals were offering their women to the sailors. You know, it depends on where you are. But so that's this book, Magellan. I really highly recommend it to anybody, not just people who are interested in covering the steps of some great explorer, but anybody interested in a great story. I highly recommend Magellan by Tim Joyner. And might not be the last you hear from me on that. By the way, see this painting up here? This one, that's my latest. It's still a little too wet for me to hold up in front of you, but someday I will. Aren't you glad? So that's that, and I'm going to shut this down, and I'll be seeing you. Bye.